Mercedes Jones, and I am the operator and owner of the Soul Food Extension. This year I was located on the corner of South Salina Street and Fayette. And the reason why I felt like it was important for me to be here today is because I read the article or the policy that's trying to be put in place for food truck vendors, and I agree. Simply because it's a lot of startup costs, and we only operate like 6 months out of the seasonal year. Like, you got to wait till it get hot. Well, for me, because I am a food cart, I am not actually a food truck. So I am open to all the elements, and so when the elements are bad outside, I can't come out. And so with that being said, I pay for this year I paid for a prime location, which maybe we should take a look at that prime location, because I paid $1,500 for that prime location, but I can't operate in that area if it's really windy, because all your stuff blows away, and rain, and again, the $1,500 plus permit fee, insurance, propane, and whatever other expenses the city has outlined for us to pay before we can operate. So it's not a simple $1,500 and you can operate. So the overhead costs are outweighing the ability to make money out there. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, so we can start. I just introduce everyone. So it's Councilor Carney, Councilor Boyle, Council President Hudson, Councilor Green, Councilor Rudd, and Councilor Driscoll. And then
Deputy Commissioner Spillane.
Great. So,
running.
Yeah. So.
You 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
So first, before we start, I just want to thank Nora specifically. So we've been working on revising this ordinance. We think it's a positive thing for the city, and there's been a lot of city staff that have been working on it, but Nora specifically has been kind of shepherding it. So I just want to first say thank you for that.
Sure.
And if you could just, I guess, from the perspective of the administration, talk through an overview of the ordinance and the impacts of it.
Yeah, I think once you brought this to the administration, we wanted to make sure if we were going to open up the ordinance, we looked at all the things that over the past few years we've heard feedback on that has not necessarily things that we could improve in the ordinance. So some of the thinking was expanding locations where people are permitted to operate and being really proactive about saying these are safe places where you can be. Thinking about demand. Where are there parts of our city that might have demand for these? Working in consultation with the Parks Department and our planning division. We've looked at places in the parks, places near parks, places where we know people want to be. Another factor we looked at was in the upcoming rezone, where have we said we're looking for mixed use where it doesn't currently exist? Is this a way for people to start getting a foothold into a new neighborhood, a new business area? And we also wanted to keep in mind the bricks and mortar folks. So we're being mindful of their investment in their store and their taxes and all of that. So balancing those forces was tricky, and I got to thank all of my city colleagues who were happy to help. They were genuinely happy to help. And I think the last part was looking at specifically for food trucks, not assigning spaces, but you're a mobile unit. You should be mobile to track demand, to be where you want to be, to tell your social media followers, hey, I'm going to be at Perseverance Park, or I'm going to be at Sunnycrest, or to really be mobile. So those were some of the factors that we considered. I think we've come up with a great first start. I think there's some more flexibility built in, which I think is going to be important going forward. And I think that's the important thing, is that this is the beginning of a conversation that hasn't happened as much as it probably should have, and that we stand ready to continue working with the Food Truck Association, with the Common Council, on making sure that this type of industry has a foothold here in Syracuse and is thriving.
I'm gonna let you catch your breath.
So like
if you run from Armory to here,
stairs and get into
it was for a really good reason, I promise.
So I just ask you questions and you just breathe for a minute till you catch your breath. Do you have a number? Do you have a total number of who has licenses or permits or whatever's needed? Do you have a total number of that?
Currently?
Yes.
There were 12 current licenses for both food trucks and the mobile vendors this year.
That's it?
That's it.
How many?
12. And how many spots currently across the city do we have that
before we make any changes,
Yeah.
do we actually have where these businesses are allowed to operate?
Yeah, it's about a dozen spots, but we can get you the specific number because they vary outside of downtown. But for sure, it's not a lot.
And being that our title is city councilors, I have to ask this question. Out of the 12 trucks or mobile vendors that you have, do you know how many are city residents?
We don't. I could get that information. We could collect that. I don't have it. We haven't looked at the LLC's address, but we definitely can. Most of them are incorporated as LLCs. But I would, anecdotally, I would say the majority. And I think, to your point, those that have maybe not felt that they can cross that they want to do this right now, I think this opens up opportunities for a lot of those trucks that I know of, I'm sure you know of, that are not currently licensed by the city, and this would enable them potentially to look at that option again.
Can you just describe a little bit more about the process of like which departments you talked to and ran this by, as well as the research that was done in terms of comparing our ordinance and our proposed ordinance to like best practices around the country?
Sure. So let me think. The Central Permit Office and Finance, who does the licensing, DPW, SPD, Parks, my department, City Planning, the I-Team helped us with some data analysis. I think that's pretty much it. Mayor's office was very helpful. So there's a lot of people from those departments bringing their expertise. We had a lot of conversations with Parks about how can we better coordinate with them when they have events to make sure the food trucks that are there are licensed and operating appropriately, or so they have some flexibility. What was the second part of your question?
Other cities and how.
So we looked at best practices, and I got to give Owen Kearney a shout out because he did a bit of research. Where food trucks, I think where people think, and then also where people know food trucks are thriving. Portland, Seattle, DC has a really good one, Philly, just to see, they tended to have a bit more flexibility about where people could go. So that was some of our research across upstate. Similar various types of restrictions. Some cities have zones, and then thank you. And then
Stop.
And that varied the permit cost. For us going forward, I didn't know if that would be the best, for making a drastic change to then introduce zones, and that's administrative. There were variances in the fees, for sure, across the country and across our, throughway partners.
Questions? All right, I got a question.
Yeah. I agree.
I'll get started. And just looking this over, I see the first item on this ordinance is a criminal background check. Do we require criminal background checks for all business licenses in the city of Syracuse?
That language mirrors the certificate of use license language, which has been used commonly and has been upheld, and sort of a good working definition. I don't think it's precluded anybody, but I think it gets us the information we need to, do that check.
Because some of the items on here, we hope to empower people out of criminal activity into legitimate business lifestyles. Yep. And some of the items on here, sale or, possession of marijuana, for instance, that's almost even legal.
Sure.
And we're going to I just hope that things like this aren't going to keep people from pursuing above board opportunities.
In the conversation with SPD and the Community Policing Division, they actually brought up a very similar concern, and they have a bit of a judgment call as they sign off on that using some of those factors. So that's we'll continue to work with them about how they are considering them.
And I do appreciate that answer, but I have to agree with Susan, because we know how at points some judgment calls are made for some folks, and
Yep.
judgment calls aren't made for others.
Yep.
So it should be consistent, and that way we wouldn't have to rely on your judgment against me or her or whoever.
Sure.
So that's where I see the
Yeah,
problem.
I think that using the certificate of use language and that process, they're not going to be reinventing the wheel. But I would certainly, if you wanted to offline sit with Deputy Chief Schaaf and talk about this more in depth, we could absolutely do that.
Well, being that it's part of the ordinance, does it make a difference? Should the ordinance be changed, or
In candor, Counselor, I think if we're going to do that, then we also need to look at the language around the certificate of use so that we're being equitable across our background checks.
Well, I think in the city of Syracuse with the goal of bringing people to above,
Yeah, I
employment.
wholeheartedly agree.
yeah, maybe we should do that.
Is that what you doing?
Yep, good.
The Class A, Class B, and Class C locations, the variance between 1,500, 1,000, and 500, that's the quality of the location where they could be located, is that correct?
And that's just for mobile carts, not for the food trucks.
Oh, okay, so that's for carts, not,
Yep.
okay. And my other question was, I guess, and I've spoken with Councilor Green about this when he first, in casual discussion about this, but I guess some of the primary pushback you'd get back would be from brick and mortar restaurants in downtown. But I think, Councilor Green, you mentioned something about studies that show that this actually can create a symbiosis and creates growth in the cuisine market, or whatever you'd want to call it, in people, enjoying food trucks, enjoying restaurants more, and kind of creating. Is there any hard data on that, or what's kind of the synopsis from your perspective from economic development of, will this have a negative impact on our restaurants, and how do you weigh that out, or will it have a net growth in your opinion?
My opinion is that it will have net growth. We were mindful with the downtown spaces to basically leave intact the spaces that have been the spaces for the past few years, because they were carefully thought out locations for those very reasons. We are not assigning them locations, so there might be more activity at those spots, which I think would be good. But I think generally, the more people you have downtown, the more variety of people you have coming and going, the more they see and experience everything that's happening. I think that's good. I mean, fundamentally, the more people you have, the more who see, oh, I like the Toss and Fire guy, he's going to be downtown. I don't normally go downtown. That kind of stuff, I think, will really help. Both the foodie scene, which is a part of a cool, vibrant city, which is what we all want, but also just getting bodies places. It's important.
Cool.
I have another question, if anybody doesn't mind. Does a food cart, to Mercedes' point, does a food cart pay the same as a food truck?
Under these proposed changes, their rates would remain the same.
And is that because they're staying in one, like they're not going to be moving, or wouldn't be that they'd be staying in one location for the season? I mean, is that?
Not having written the original ordinance, I wouldn't want to speculate. We intentionally did not disturb that section of the ordinance. If it's worth looking into, we'd be happy to look into that. The discussion between Councilor Green and I was food trucks.
Yeah, and I can tell you why I didn't touch that is because, right now there's one food truck that participates in this process, right? So in a city of 145,000 people that one, clearly that wasn't working. There are more carts that participate. So I think there's 11 carts, right? And that might be a further discussion to say, how do we get more of those, or how do we do a better job managing those? Mm-hmm. But I saw that as less of a low-hanging fruit than the trucks, which clearly needed to be revised.
Okay. No, I mean, and I get it. I mean, you do. When you walk around downtown, you do see a number of food carts. But again, like you said, there's one food truck. But
If the goal is to create this vibrant, food community with trucks and carts, as Mercedes pointed out, the carts can't really operate in inclement weather, and they won't be around if it's raining, while a cart will. So would it be beneficial to look into a lower price for carts and a higher price for trucks?
I think there is a difference.
Because trucks will potentially be profiting more because they'll be able to participate in the sale of their goods on a more frequent basis than a cart.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things we looked at, so the existing locations for the carts are actually better locations than the trucks, right? So like the Perseverance Park is a great location that there's not a truck location for it. So same thing, there's some right in front of Clinton Square, right, that there's not a truck location for it. So I think that's part of the difference. And I'm totally on board with, looking at the carts as well. I don't think that this would, if we were to pass this, it doesn't preclude us from coming back next week and doing the carts as well. But that was just, I looked at it as the truck market clearly isn't working. Let's focus on fixing that. but that doesn't mean that there aren't improvements to be made other places as well.
Would the truck market improving push out the carts?
I mean, so none of the truck locations conflict with the current cart locations, right?
They're completely separate. If you have a truck, you can't be in a cart location?
Yes.
Yeah, they're separate locations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see if any of these guys have questions first. Counselors, any other questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that sentiment of perhaps investigating the carts at some point in the future. It does seem that if we would make those exceptions for the trucks, that the carts should be put on a similar scale. Just my thought. But I saw the gentleman in the back looks very eager to speak.
Sure. Are you Paul?
Yes.
Sure. Come on up.
My problem is, I'm Paul Woleski. I run the dog cabin over there by Hotel Syracuse. And I don't understand why the food truck people would get a different fee than me. If I'm paying $1,500, I believe they should pay $1,500 because that's what I've been paying for 25 years. Why should they get a cheaper price? I have a truck. I have food. I have health department fees. I have the fire department. All the same fees they have. Why should theirs be $1,000 less than mine? It doesn't make sense to me. That's why I'm just trying to figure that one out. I have the same fees.
Sure. So, I mean, I think one of the things is that the locations currently out for carts are better than the truck locations.
Well, they're only better as hard as you work them. If you work your spot hard, you're going to build up a customer base. And I've been working hard for 25 years, so I have regular customers, which makes my spot look good. Other people could take my spot, and then they don't get the business. They'll find me.
So, and I'm
I'm
not saying you're not a good businessman.
I'm just being honest. I've been doing this for years.
Yeah.
You
So,
know.
so one of the things we looked at when we looked at evaluating the locations is where are there the most foot traffic, right? So what we found is that the cart locations have the most foot traffic compared to the trucks.
Well,
And
that's because of fire lanes where the food trucks can't park in certain areas, obviously, because so traffic can get by them.
Yep.
But that doesn't explain why they're going to pay $1,000 less. That don't seem right, especially when I've been doing it 20 years longer than any of them that even got into it. Some of them are recent truck vendors. They just started. I'm just trying to figure it out the reason why they're ahead of, they get a break and I don't.
Sure. So, and one of the other things I would point out too that's different is the trucks aren't guaranteed a spot, right? So the trucks under this ordinance will need to get there early. They'll need to secure their spot versus,
So
a cart is
they won't
guaranteed
have
a
to go
spot.
in the lottery? They
Correct.
won't have to go in the food lottery?
Correct. So under the current proposed ordinance, there will be allowable locations, right? So you won't be guaranteed a specific spot. The truck would be allowed to operate in any of those areas, but not guaranteed to operate. So for example, if there's a large event and there's cars parked there, the truck is unable to operate there, which is
Okay.
different than a cart, which has a permit to park, to be there anytime they want to. So,
Well, we
getting
got
back to-
time limits on how long we can be there.
Okay, but still, you never arrived to your location and someone else is taking it, right?
No,
That's one
well,
of the
they know,
differences.
because you pay for that spot, obviously.
Correct.
But now I see Ladybug Lunchbox comes to the lottery every year. How come she has to go in the lottery? She's
So
a
what we're
food-
doing is proposing a new ordinance, right? So this would be different. So the lady.
So she wouldn't have to show up again at the lottery.
Correct. The lottery for the trucks
Would
would
be
not.
just for the push carts.
Correct.
All right, I just don't understand the fee thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Has there been any data behind A, B, and C locations as far as the potential income? And does it balance with the differences in the fees?
Honestly, Counselor, we did not look at those as part of this work. We can certainly take a look at those again, but we were leaving those intact as they were. But absolutely, we can do a little bit of research on foot traffic and whatnot. I think when you think about where those locations are and we have them mapped, it's kind of self-evident a little bit too.
So I guess I sort of have an issue with the argument that foot traffic or traffic in general, because much to what the gentleman said, I've brought more traffic to the Holly Green neighborhood.
No doubt.
With moving my business over
Yep.
there. So today, there's absolutely more traffic because I brought it there with my business. So you know, the argument that, oh, in those spots there's more location. Well, maybe there's more traffic over in front of that spot because his stand's over there.
Right.
But
I mean, we could.
that is, I think we all sort of had a little bit of an issue up front with, you know, saying that we're going to address mobile, and I get the argument for it. It is. It's an underused and underserved thing in our community. It's something that we want to jumpstart and get going, but it shouldn't be at the detriment of the carts that are, you know, currently in existence.
So I would just say, so it's not a detriment to the carts, right? So it's what we're saying is we could give the same advantage to the carts, right?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's saying the trucks are going to make the carts out of business, right?
No, I think the idea is that everybody works together. You know, everything is, but I think we can't leave carts at the same. I mean, I think we actually do have to, you know, look into that a little bit more than maybe we have.
I do too, because I do feel like they're at a disadvantage, because when you're talking about the inclement weather, then they're going to have to pack up their carts and they have to leave. They can't stay there, but the truck stays there. They're stationary. So the carts, there is a difference for me with the carts and the trucks.
So one of the things I would just say, and you know, obviously we did a pretty extensive outreach to the food trucks. So they actually, most of them close for the winter, and same thing with the carts as well. So the trucks and the carts are closed for the winter. Trucks are closed for the winter.
Once it gets below 40, trucks have difficulty, correct?
But we close for the winter too. We're off for 3-4
Yeah,
months.
I'm not disagreeing with that. So I guess, Nora, in your role, like what have been the feedback and the participation levels from the carts themselves over the last couple of years, and then, you know, what kind of outreach has been done to look at revisiting that part of it?
You know, candidly, this has been our first attempt at reworking this ordinance. I don't think it's the last attempt by any means, and we can certainly start having those conversations with the carts. The feedback we received internally was the system has been not perfect, but folks are getting their spots and are, you know, to Councilor Carney's point, driving their business based on their, you know, acumen. So if this body would like to do a little bit more research into that, and certainly we can try to provide some support for that.
I want to thank Councilor Green for pursuing this and doing such good work on it, because I think this is definitely something that we need to do. I'm ready to make it happen. I think that since everybody is about to close for the winter, all the carts are just about to close for the winter, taking a minute to make sure that we lock it all down and do it 100% correctly. You know, if it takes one more month, I don't think it would be a bad idea. Just a recommendation.
So, I mean, I think one of the other things, well, you can probably talk to, how's the permitting process work for an annual basis?
Right, so the lottery is usually at the beginning of the year. So we do, to your point, have a little bit of time if we wanted to do that. We want to also make sure we have enough time so that we are letting the existing operators know the changes that are coming and make sure they're fully up to speed on what, if any, changes this body decided to make.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that probably would be helpful for all of us is, I think there's two separate issues. One is, this is, you know, an improvement to the legislation for the food trucks, right? So I think it'd be helpful for us to talk through that and what issues we might have with that. And then it seems like there's, you know, a separate and related conversation is, can we also make improvements to this separate issue, which is the carts? So I think to kind of further this discussion, is there other food truck specific comments on that part of it?
I'd love to see the maps of locations. Is that available?
Yeah, it was in an email.
Oh, it was in the email? Okay, sorry, I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's best viewed, it's a GIS map, so it's best viewed honestly online, and we'll make sure when this is all complete that is readily available, and that we work with better people at GIS than I to make sure that there are also hard copy maps available by neighborhood.
Great.
I have one last thing, and then I promise I'll stop. I had mentioned this to Councilor Green, and I think you were looking into it as well, but I don't know if other cities do this, but I know more food trucks are going to mean more garbage in the city. And I don't know if we're a take-in, take-out city or what, but it may be beneficial for us to be able to provide some sort of a dumpster for food trucks to use in the city for a fee, or some sort of receptacle?
I believe there's sort of a carry-in, carry-out provision in the ordinance as it stands. I think for any sort of it's absolutely something to think about. That's an important issue, to make sure that they have those
their
receptacles.
business even easier.
Probably, it might be an interesting discussion to have with the Food Truck Association if that's something that they wanted to provide their membership, and we could assist.
So, Nora, and then I'm gonna do like Council Ball and be quiet. But I'm looking at it, so you mean in a city of this size, we only have 12?
So the distinction I would make is licensed to operate in the right-of-way. Food trucks that operate on private property are outside our scope of regulatory authority. So while you see food trucks at venues and at parties and at, you know, the breweries around town, they're usually on private property. And they're not licensed by the city. They are going through a number of other regulatory checks, absolutely, but they are outside our purview.
And they don't need a COU?
The food trucks don't require a COU, no.
Nora, can you talk about, and this would be separate from any legislation, but outreach that's been done to Parks Department and other possibilities of having a rodeo or other events like that?
Sure, yeah, we did. When we met with the food truck representatives, they indicated that a sort of standing event is really helpful to their business to bring awareness. So we have had preliminary discussions with parks about trying to get maybe one up and running before the end of the season, to, you know, say to people, hey, this is happening. And then to work over the winter to set something more formal up in a city public space, to, you know, again, that vibrancy factor, keeping in mind the brick and mortar businesses and their concerns, but putting something regular together.
Okay, we have a couple more. So Brianna.
Hi, I'm Brianna Petrosi. I manage the Papagayo taco truck. I wanted to speak on a couple things. You had mentioned something about the background checks for getting a permit. I think that language does deter people who might have a mark on their record from even applying, because they think they're automatically going to not get approval because of their history. Whether it's a judgment call or not, that language just initially might deter someone from applying. I also wanted to talk about the weather. Food trucks also don't or might not operate in inclement weather. The customers don't necessarily want to come out when it's snowing or raining or windy or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's difficult for us to operate as well. And the trash, most of the food trucks, at least in the Food Truck Association, we are a carry-in, carry-out truck. So we bring our own trash cans, we take our trash back with us. I just wanted to
Would it be better if you had someplace to dump the trash?
Of course.
In the city?
Definitely.
And
I'd
would you
rather
be
not take
interested in-
nasty trash back
Right.
on my food truck where
For a
I'm
fee,
preparing
though.
food. It depends on what that fee would be.
Right.
So,
For a reasonable fee.
yes, of course, of course.
So the trucks and the carts, all of you guys have to go through Department of Health, correct?
Department of Health, yep.
And you all have to have the insurance, and you all have to pay that fee.
And whatever permits for whichever places, sometimes it's county permits, sometimes it's local permits, city permits, et cetera, et cetera. So we definitely pay our share.
So can I ask a question, and if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. So outside of the 1,500, how much are you out of pocket for the season?
Oh, I wouldn't, I'm not an owner, so I don't handle that part, but Pat, who?
I'm Pat Orr with PB&J's Lunchbox.
Pat, if you could just,
Sure,
Come join me. That's all right.
sorry.
Take, need the mics.
That's all right. I don't know the exact cost. I don't really put it all together like that. I just know that I pay insurance, in fees and permits just like everybody else. It can be thousands by the end of the season.
And I just wanted to know what a roundabout estimate would have been for your season.
Like the insurance is over $1,000 for the season, and then permits you have probably it's like $500-600 for permits, for the health permits, and then if you have more than one truck, it's double and triple and stuff like that. Event fees can be anywhere from $25 up to $1,000, $1,500, depending on how many people are coming in. Taste of Syracuse is very high. You know, the Jazz Fest and stuff are, you know, $500, $600, $700 for permits for a food truck. So that's a lot that you have to sell. $3 tacos to get just that to go, or hot dogs or stuff, you know, it's a lot to pay just for the permits and the fees to get in. Every event that you do, it's your choice. You don't have to do them, but I think that the question with the fees because of the carts having to pay more, I think it's a good question. I think maybe the fees have been high for the whole, however many years, too high for 20 years back. If he's been doing it for 20 years and he's been paying $1,500, it's a lot, but if you have a good spot, you can make it. If you don't, you won't. I was at the most for 2 or 3 years, and I just quit paying it because I just didn't get enough traffic. The first year I did because it was construction on the parking lot. So I had all the construction workers, and then when the construction cut in half, the business cut in half. So you had your main people that would come, but it wasn't big enough to support the $1,500 for the year. And then a lot of times people would be parked in my spot. So I'd get down there and I'd wait and try to get them, and then I'd park behind them, and I was parked illegally. I shouldn't have done it, but I had all this food with me, and you go there prepared to work, and when somebody takes your spot, you either lose the cost of that or hopefully you'll have a job the next day. And in the winter, it was never plowed out. It was just, in the parking lot or the sidewalk on that side of the most wasn't, so you couldn't work. So the snow was piled up there, so you couldn't work. And I think you can work year round with the carts, the food trucks if you want, and that. So I think it's great that we're visiting it, and it's not going to be fixed in one day, and it's going to be a trial and error thing. I think we're going to try the new spots and see if it works. Having a section of road instead of one spot, because most trucks can't fit in one spot. It's usually 2 or 3. The trucks are bigger than they were before. So I think that it's going to be a process, and I hope that everybody just works together and we can figure it out, because food trucks would be good downtown. It'll draw more people out. People will come out of their offices. I don't think it'll hurt the restaurants, because I think it's different people. People that want to go to a restaurant are going to go to a restaurant, and they're not going to go to a food truck. But there's people out there that want to go to a food truck that walk at lunch and stuff, and they want to grab and go, and they want to be able to do that. They want that that option.
Yeah, because restaurants don't sell hot dogs.
Yeah, and we
We know what Helen wants.
and we support the restaurants too. We go to the restaurants too. So it's not that we don't support them and that, and it's just I think if we're parked in the right locations, far enough away from restaurants, I think we'll be fine. And I think if the restaurants look at it as we bring more people down. We had an event in Baldwinsville this year, and we brought like over 5,000-6,000 people out there. We had 13 trucks. So people in Syracuse area want this, and we're trying to help provide it.
Great.
But
Thank you.
do you guys have any questions on us?
I would just say it does seem a little potentially problematic with the first come, first served part. Like if there was a way to have a reservation a week ahead of time or something, that might minimize conflict or minimize the lack of predictability or something for the people who are communicating on a social media site or anything else about where they're going to be.
Yeah, we administratively we had not figured that out. So I think that's going to be a little bit. Food trucks are in designated areas. There's some built in there, but it's just a nut we haven't figured out. And I think as this grand experiment goes forward, we'll probably get some better ideas.
And that might be where you can only stay at one spot for maybe 2 weeks or 2 days or 2 or 3 times, and then you have to move so that other people get an option. It's kind of like the camping reservations.
And I don't think we want it to be over regulatory in this edit. So letting the Food Truck Association and the other businesses sort of work some of this out.
I think we could work it out amongst us. I mean,
within reason, because we are part of the Syracuse Food Truck Association, so we work well together. There might be some other people who want to get that one spot every single day, and they're there at 7 a.m. to set up and whatever and monopolize that spot, which isn't fair, but there's people that will work together and then there's people that won't. So,
and I think most of them are going to be room for multiple trucks, right? So it'll be at least
block
like
length, so
1 or 2 or something like that. So I mean, I think that it would be able to work out, and we kind of communicate together and stuff. I mean, we're all adults.
Letting the market dictate.
We should be able to do it.
but at the same time, when you have the ability to have this block or that block. If this block is taken, you go to the other one, and then you make an announcement on Facebook or whatever social media site you choose, and that's how it works. I mean, I'm sure you all have seen like the food truck wars and things like that. That's how it works. It's all kind of pop-up stuff. Today, we're used to doing schedules where we're going to be here, 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 and here because we don't have the ability to just go somewhere and set up. It's a lot different for even us.
Yeah, it is. And I can tell you that the reason I quit getting into the lottery was because of the lottery. Because the one year I didn't get the spot that I wanted was the year I just didn't take one. Because you work so hard to build, like he did. Yeah, you build your customer base in that. You know, restaurants build their customer base and they get to stay. But food trucks, somebody can come in and take that spot away from you. And they're not going to get the same customer base you do because you have a following and stuff like that. And the lottery it's just, I just think it's so unfair. It shouldn't even be a proposition. There should be, okay, you have the spot and you've had it for 10 years, you paid for it, you built your location, your people that follow you, and then somebody comes in and takes it, and then you don't make the money that you made. You might not cover that $1,500 fee and stuff like that. And it's just a fairer way to do it, I think, because.
So I think what I would propose, because I mean, all the research that I did was like truck specifically and how to improve that. But I think, you know, you're bringing up good points, and the people talking about the carts are bringing up good points. So what I think I would propose is I'm happy to meet with you or any of your colleagues and any other counselors that want to do it, because I think what we're proposing for the trucks obviously wouldn't work for stands, right? We're talking about doing different blocks and different neighborhoods, you know, to make that allowable, and you need to have a cart needs to have a specific area, right? So I personally don't know what best practices around the country are for the carts and what the best practices for fees are. So I'd be happy to convene kind of a separate meeting where we go over that and we look at the ordinance to see, you know, what makes sense for you guys and how do we empower you guys to kind of grow your business and go that way. So if you don't mind just staying afterwards, I'd be happy to start that process. Okay.
And to play devil's advocate, we have 1 of 12 food truck spots taken versus how many of the cart spots. So clearly the food trucks are an issue because we don't want to come downtown because it's not worth it for us.
But I think of the 12 was a total, carts and trucks.
Yes, 11 carts and 1 truck.
So of how many food truck spots are available?
It's over a dozen. It's almost near 20. I just don't have it.
So out of those dozen to 20, only 1 spot of food truck locations is taken. So I just wanted to clear that up.
I know the
too.
one location by the War Memorial, that was probably the biggest issue. There was never available, maybe 20% of the time the spot was available when the truck showed up there. So that's the biggest issue with trying to get there and get your food out and stuff like that.
Okay. Other questions from counselors?
I have to run. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Feel good. All right. Well, thank you all very much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.